Stephanie. I'm so grateful that you're joining me this morning. Just looking up, when I first saw your work, I just got this energetic buzz like, ooh, she needs to be on my show. And after just our little pre conversation, I can see that what you're about and what message you're sharing is very much aligned with sort of the vibe of my listeners and the audience around how do we move into our creativity? I have a lot of women that come to me who feel blocked. They don't actually, and we'll get into this, but they don't actually know what it is that's going to move through them and how they can hone, cull, refine that and bring it as an offering to the world. Because do you or do you not agree that your creativity, you can create prosperity and abundance with your creativity?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do agree with that.
What do you think is really blocking women from that piece of drawing in abundance or prosperity through their creativity?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think there is our inner life, which, promotes our attitudes about what we deserve, what we think we're capable of. And then there's the outer life, which truly we live in a world where women still make 80 cents to the dollar that a man makes. So you're really dealing with kind of a twofold thing. Um, One is developing the courage to know that change has to happen inwardly first, and then you can be an advocate and an activist for change happening on the outside.
Mhm.
Like like I said, 80 cents on the dollar, it's still not a level playing field. This is something women have been working at for a long time. We
Right.
happen to be living in a very good time. If there was ever a time in history that women could experience abundance and success in their careers, it would be now.
This is the time. Yeah.
This is the time. And I think that that will continue to grow, but we're not there yet. And that's why it takes all of us collectively coming together to say to each other as sisters, you can do it.
And rooting for each other as opposed to
Yes.
seeing each other as a threat or our old comparison models that really just don't, that squelches creativity.
Yes.
So if a woman doesn't quite know, maybe she feels this soul calling or this stirring or something that's maybe moving her, but she doesn't know where to channel it. She doesn't know how to identify what the best way for her to express or create is. I have some ideas around why that happens, but um, what would you say to her? How would you tell her to just maybe identify or come into her, own, maybe give herself permission to find that, identify that?
I don't know that there's a one size fit all answer to that, but what comes up for me when you ask that question is an old biblical quote: be still and know I am God.
Mm,
If one can say to themselves, be still and know.
yeah.
And I think that they're in the stillness sometimes, we're so active oriented. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to create this, and then I'm going to make a list for myself. And then every Monday morning, and it goes on and on. And it's like sometimes what we need to do is we have an idea, a great
Right.
idea, and then we need to sit back and let it unfold in the psyche and come to us.
Mhm.
Let it come to you, as opposed to going out there and trying to carpe diem, seize the day,
Right.
make it happen. I think that a lot of that, what blocks us and keeps us from really embodying our creativity, is that we just don't get still. Take the time to get still.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree. And that's actually one of my favorite biblical passages. Be still and know I am is also you, right? That you are the I am. And
Yeah.
that's where creativity lives. That's creatrix. So let's talk about the creatrix. It's such a buzzword, and that's why I wanted you on my podcast. It was a fairly new term to me until a couple of years ago when I read a passage in a book called Burning Woman by Lucy Pierce. And she talked about it. And then I went to a retreat literally like 3 months later, and she was talking about it. And I'm like, where have I been living under a rock? What is this? And so, how would you define? Because this name of your book is Creatrix Rising, Unlocking the Power of Midlife Women. Love it. Um, let's talk about the Creatrix and what that means to you.
Well, creatrix comes from the three Greek fates. There was the spinner, the weaver, and the cutter. And the weaver was a woman who makes things. That's what creatrix means. It means a woman who makes things. Now,
Mm,
if you think about the different archetypes in our culture, men have always had accessible to them positive archetypes for aging. So as men get older, they have the archetype of sage and wizard.
right.
Women have had the archetypes of crone and hag. And those words mean disagreeable old woman.
Mhm.
And then there's, some witchcraft attached to that and some other stuff, and it gets very messy very fast. What I saw around me was that collectively women are rising, and that creatrix could easily be the new archetype for women that are midlife and
Mm,
beyond. That once we begin midlife, which I consider like once you cross that menopausal bridge
you're
or are
there. Yeah.
crossing, you're
Which
there.
happened for me at like 48.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
some
And I could
people, it happens
definitely feel
later.
something coming, like a mantle descending on me. Like it was hormonally disruptive, let's be honest, leading up to it. It was a storm, but I could definitely feel myself settling into a new way of absorbing information. And I actually started this podcast on my like right after I turned 50 because
Yeah.
it was my way of just like, I got stuffed.
Yeah.
Anyway, finish what you were saying about Creatrix. So it's she who makes things.
That's what it means. A
But
woman.
this new archetype you're saying is that it's that we're moving into it being maybe not an older woman, but why do you think that is that the creatrix more comes into herself at midlife?
Well, I think the creatrix comes into herself at midlife based on what I have observed, being an observer in the world. There were three events that happened in just the last few years. The first one was the Women's March of 2017,
Mhm.
and the great unification that happened, not only among
Yeah.
women, but among the supporters and the helpers of women, because that march wasn't just women. It was husbands, it was grandfathers, it
Right.
was children, it was young women, it was old women. And as an old feminist, marching with young women, I realized, oh my God, we've been carrying this torch together for longer than we realize.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened was in 2018, the following year, more women over the age of 50 ran for local, state, and national office than ever before in the history of this.
Really?
Yes. And
Hmm.
the third thing that happened, which was a great unburdening, was hashtag Me Too. Because
Mhm.
now the dirty little secret was out in the open. And I don't really know a woman who hasn't dealt with that on some
I
level
don't either.
in corporate America. But now it was out there.
Yeah.
And as a result, we are living in a post hashtag Me Too world in which men are becoming more sensitive to that.
Mhm.
Everyone is becoming more sensitive to that. Um, so those three things were my clues that something's shifting. And I looked at the old paradigm of maiden, mother, crone, which really, that trilogy kind of came together through Robert Graves, who was a poet and a novelist in the 1930s and 40s. He wrote a book in 1940 called The White Goddess, which was an homage to his poetic muse. The problem was that as
Everyone
someone,
took it so literally, right?
well, the problem was he tried to hold it out as an actual historic thing. And it wasn't an actual historic thing. It was just his musings, and he would have been better off keeping it like that. But nonetheless, it seeped into the society and was kind of adopted by neo-paganism. And now the maiden mother crone began to represent the triple goddess, the waning moon, or the, crescent moon, full moon, waning moon.
Yeah.
So it got dressed up a little bit. I have never been completely comfortable with the word crone. And
Me either.
I don't want a crone bash. The reason I don't want a crone bash is
I know, me too. But I'd love what your take on this is.
I met a wonderful woman recently who said, I am a pagan. I embrace the crone. And I thought, well, there are women that kept alive the word crone and the placeholder that she was in our culture because there was no other place to go. There was no other name. And thus, I postulate boldly, hey, let's call this period creatrix.
Mhm.
Because crone, once again, it means disagreeable old woman. I don't know any woman who wants that title.
Right. It's interesting. One of my spiritual mentors, Donna Nielsen, she has a PhD, and she's probably done more research than anyone I know on the historical goddess, and just, you know, sort of the evolution of how we left the feminine out of the whole story, religiously and other.
Right.
And she calls the crown, that
Yeah.
there's some evidence that it's a crowning time, like when a baby is about to be born, he's crowning, or she's crowning. And then also you crown yourself. It's like woman crowned. And then she said, hag, there's a play on that as well. That Hagia Sophia was a Greek term for the mother goddess, or women's wisdom. And so hag was a shortening of Hagia Sophia. So that's her take on it. I love that. And I love that you're replacing it with creatrix. um I being in my 50s now, I remember I'm like, I'm not sure, because everybody's like, oh, 50 is the new 35 or something. I'm like, there's something wrong with that we can't just say 50 is 50.
50
And
is the new 49, you know?
yeah, it's like, I don't want to go back to 35. What I've learned in the past 15 to 17 years has been profound. I want to be able to disseminate my wisdom in a non-egoic way, in a creative way. I have more of that like messenger archetype I'm learning. And so I want to be able to take the crone, or the wise woman is what I call her, and move her into the space of, I love what you said about let it come to you. Let it fall. Let yourself let it find you through attraction. And that's very feminine. Where you said the old model of carpe diem seize, that's more the masculine driven.
Right.
It's what got us into this mess.
Right.
So there has to be a new archetype. There has to be a new way. Okay, so the first happening was the Women's March in 2017. These are all in very close succession. You could see
Yes.
the feminine rising.
Yes.
The next year was women. You said more women over the age of 50 had stepped into
They ran for
office.
Yep.
Okay, and then the third thing, Me Too movement, was that was that in 20? It was
It
kind of in
was
that
at
same.
the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the Bill Cosby case was going on, the Harvey Weinstein case was going on, the symbol hashtag Me Too was starting to happen. It all seemed very, very close. But I think that was also a part of
We really saw the like shadow masculine, the unhealthy, toxic masculine, just right. And it's almost like, and then COVID happens, you know? So
well, COVID's an interesting thing, because the question to ask of COVID is, what's the intent? What's the consciousness? If a virus is a living thing, just like we are living organisms, there is an intent to our life. There is a consciousness to our life. So I have asked that actually in my book of the COVID virus. What is the intention? What is the consciousness? Now, in my way of believing and seeing, and this is, based on nothing except, my own interior life, I see the virus as a woman that held a light, but it is not the light of illumination. It is the light of interrogation. It is the light that revealed all of the places that we are broken in this world right now. And that's a powerful place.
Yeah, it's so vulnerable.
Yes.
There's such a vulnerability to it. And it's quite precarious if you don't know how to be still and know.
Yes.
That's why we need these older women to say, hey, I've lived through my own storms. I've been through my own quote unquote COVIDs in my own domain. And here's what I gleaned from that. But then you have these women trying to do all of these, they realize maybe they missed a window in their life. This hasn't really happened to me because I stepped onto my path in my 30s, but I had to fight for it as a mother of lots of children. But you see women reaching that age, we'll say midlife, and they realize they gave all their power away. They were silenced, and then they just like, who am I? I'm sure you address that maybe in some of your work.
Well, in Creatrix Rising, I mean, I tell my personal story of finding that who am I, of finding that voice, because it's not just something that descends upon you. That is a hard, wisdom is hard won.
Yeah, you've got to do it. You've got to be in it. You've got to
Well,
fight
you
for it.
gotta work it. And wisdom tends to hide in the grit of life.
Mhm.
It's not in the smooth, easy places of the people who've got it together, if
Yeah.
if you believe in that myth, but it's in the grit, which means you have to get in there and work it. And sometimes it's painful.
Yeah. I love that. Hides in the grit. And I think we're programmed to the opposite, to the contrary. Like
Yes.
you find your wisdom in the light and
Yes.
the joy.
And
And
creativity really grows out of the muck and the mud of life. You're not going to find it in the polite places. And I think that's some of what, you asked earlier, what keeps women stuck. And I think one of the things that keeps us stuck from creativity, it's like, it's got to grow out of the mud. The lotus grows out of the mud. It's a
yeah,
beautiful lotus, but its roots are in the mud.
right.
And the same is true for us and our creativity. The other part of that is that I think women have a unique story. I read a book recently, Cassandra Speaks by
I love
Elizabeth,
that book by Elizabeth Less.
and
Yeah.
I love that book. The subtitle of that book, you could spend a whole show unpacking, which is When Women Tell Their Story, the Human Story Changes.
Mm.
I love that subtitle.
I love that too, because I'm in the middle of writing my depth story, the raw, like I got all the research down and I got the principles. And now I get to like, oof, oof,
Yeah.
climb
Leave
into
it
that
in.
descent, the Inanna, the goddess Inanna and this descent.
Oh,
It's like that creatrix rising, that phoenix from the ashes. But I think one of the things that I've learned is I've had several ascents and descents. And now when I take an ascent journey, I have more presence or descent journey. Yeah, I have more presence with it. Like I can be that observer that you talked about. And um, it's like, what is this? Again, what is the intention? Like you're saying, what is this teaching me? And and it's tricky because it's like then you personalize it. Well, what haven't I learned yet? What am I still not getting? And you go back into
no,
the old
I
beat
love
up.
it that you hold it as cyclical because it's my objection to the word woke, which connotes past tense. And
Yeah, I got it all now. I figured it all out.
awakening happens again and again and again. Reinvention happens again and again and again. And I also love that Inanna myth, which really, parallels the Persephone myth, that
Yeah.
you make the descent. And that's what we do creatively is we make the descent. We learn to dance with Hades and then
Mm-hmm.
we rise up again. And in that rising, the Greeks use it as how to demonstrate the seasons. But I think that our own life follows that same kind of cyclical kind of thing where it's like you reinvent yourself and you
Mm-hmm.
reawaken and then you do it again. And
Yeah.
does anyone ever have it all figured out? I mean, there's no such thing as perfection. It's like this is the process and it is the process of life. And hopefully you are experiencing ascent and descent till the day you die.
Right. Yeah. And that is the deep programming I had that was so false as I
The
was
idea that
growing
you
up.
get it all together one day.
That if you do these things, check, 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 all these spiritual practices, all these things, then someday you'll be, I don't want to say perfected, but there is that's how I internalize it. And that's how many internalize it, that I will have it figured out, that I will have all the mysteries revealed to me, that I will know. And what we're saying is the knowing is that you are in the journey. You are the I am with a human body on the earth in the journey. And that is the power of our existence. A lot of people live for the afterlife. They live for, someday I'll be able to express my creativity fully when I have all my faculties and I'm not dealing with depression or I'm not dealing with this family situation or I'm not having this health challenge or I have more money, right? So we do the programming is not it happens in religion, it happens in academia, it happens in family systems, it happens definitely socioculturally. So I think that this feminine rising and you can back me up on this, but it's part of it is just like, ooh, like be in the now, like own who you are and what you've experienced. And it's never too late. It's never
Right.
too late. Um, when you've kind of focused on the midlife woman and sort of the powers and challenges, thresholds, that come with that, what kind of peace have you come to for yourself around the aging process? That's a really,
I love my life.
yeah.
I love my age. It's different. I would walk by a mirror as a young woman and I was like, hey, I'm looking good. You walk by a mirror as an older woman, you want to avoid the, oh, look, I look like crap. You want to get to a place where you embrace the gifts of the years. There are different gifts for each phase of life. In your 20s, there's a certain gift. In your 30s and 40s, when you're trying to build a career. In your 50s, I'm 69. This is my last year in my 60s.
Wow, you look great. I mean,
Thank
not
you.
that I'm judging you by your exterior, but I wouldn't have guessed 69.
I go, seize the day. This is the time to seize the day, not to go out and claw and compete for something, but to seize the moment of this life. There is a reason that nature keeps us alive past our childbearing years. Because, physically on this planet, I really have no purpose, right? I can't have kids anymore. I'm not going to have kids anymore.
But that is part of the programming we got, is that our worth is attached to nurturing others and mothering.
And that's why the mother is the Madonna, and then you become the crone.
She's either the Virgin Mary or the Mother Mary. She's not a woman.
Exactly.
That's why I love Mary Magdalene, and that's what I'm writing about. Just FYI.
I love Mary Magdalene too. And
that archetype is really rising right now.
Yes. It is. And, the Magdalene movement probably is what financed the Jesus movement.
Yeah.
Because the Magdalenes were wealthy.
Yes.
Were wealthy people. She probably financed that.
She was probably a huge benefactress of his.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But I kind of forgot where we were going.
I was like,
there's so much.
Yeah. I think what's coming to me is like coming back to the way Mother Nature, quote unquote, ages.
Nature keeps us alive.
Cycles.
And it comes back to that very thing we talked about in the beginning. And that's the be still and know part. Because when you get to be a certain age, I don't have the same athletic prowess that I had in my 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s. So there is more time for me and more relaxation for me to be able to sit on my back porch and muse about the forest that's back there, to be able to sit and say, isn't life a miracle? To have those moments where you really do brush up against the divine, that you get a mystical experience and just sitting and going, wow, there's so much sky here.
Right.
There's so much clouds. And just in that instant, there's like this little mini moment, of great heightened awareness, consciousness, mysticism. And that's who we grow into as women. That's our potential. How can you not love that? How can you not say the feminine divine is everywhere? My message, my job at this stage of my life now is to hold the torch, is to hold the light that illuminates for the women who stand behind me. Yes. Just the way my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and my mother held that torch for me. And I know that there will come a day when I am ready to recede from this world. And metaphorically speaking, I will turn around and pass that torch to the younger woman behind me, who then will hold the torch high for the women behind her. That's what we do as women. We give each other grace. So the years, man, it's sacred.
Yeah. I love everything you're saying, especially, the whole being away shore, holding a torch. And I really identify with that metaphor. It's like, I think I have a lot of masculine, like, achievement stuff in me. And
yeah, me too.
So trying to bring it back to like, no, I can't change what's happening. It's going to happen. The dismantling that we see before our eyes, the system's crumbling. Who knows what's in store for your future. Like I can't protect my children from that, we'll say. I can't even really, all that I can do as a way shower is find that illumination within, that divine spark charge, that beautiful inner light, the sacred divine within, and do everything that I can to let that flow first. It took me decades to even understand that. I mean, I'm sitting in church for 50 years not getting it, because it was all based on an outward expectation. It was all based on, if you do these things like we're telling you to do them, then you might experience a measure of this. And it was a really subtle half truth. But when I climbed in to understand, because everything in religion is based on the sacred masculine model for the most part.
Well, everything in monotheism certainly is.
Yes,
The
yes.
male hierarchical model.
Yes. But when you get into that like there is a feminine force that is just what it is. And it's like so accepting of where you're at. And it doesn't seek to change anything. It seeks to heal with love. And that's the kind of illumination that I'm talking about, is embodying that, so that it sort of tempers my drive with the masculine, because I need that. You need that. You wouldn't have even written a book without that.
Of course.
Right. So we need.
And at the same time, Sherry, what you're saying is what I feel is like women are so over the apple thing.
Yeah.
There were two sets of teeth in that apple. And it symbolizes that the fall from grace, and that women are seductresses, and that women should be second-class citizens, and all of these things. And it's like, it rumbles in the undercurrent of the culture.
Yeah.
And so part of claiming the creatrix, part of claiming the divine, is also, once again, claiming the natural world, the seasons, the cycles. This is how, women's cycle.
Right. Well, we just had this beautiful Aquarian full moon last night, and I could feel the waters of emotion, because the moon pulls your waters, it pulls your emotion. And I could feel, but I also felt this beautiful opening for what's happening in the planet, this Aquarian season now that we're in. And I actually just got back from Glastonbury. I was there for 2 weeks, Glastonbury, England. And there's a huge divine, I was doing research and doing a retreat there. And, it was so beautiful to just sit in the land. And, there's a whole bunch of myths and legends around where it was at. And there's a lot of power there, feel a lot of spiritual power and energy. But I mean, do a whole episode on this, but basically, like, it's what we're talking about. It's like, I can be more in my creativity, because my whole thing is just get this book done. Right. And I'm sure you went through that season where you're like, okay, just write it. And it's like, no, for me, the creativity is not just putting a book out there. It's, what am I learning about the arc of my life? What is this bringing me back to? How can I cultivate this wisdom and really love myself? As cliche and trite and whatever, I don't know how else to say it. But that was my bottom line. And it's what I've been teaching for years, but I think I'm just now embodying this sacred, and going to Chalice Well and being around the white spring, and just knowing that lives in me, the red, the white, the power, the passion, the masculine, the feminine, and to integrate those for my creativity. That is how I will find my creativity, not bypassing over the ugly stuff, or not letting myself go to feel that, but allowing myself to hold that duality, knowing that is creativity. Is
yes,
holding.
That's the mud and the muck.
Yeah.
And you're writing something that requires that you dig around in your psyche. That, you've found a creative definition for that. And I think that that's really what creativity is that our creativity mirrors creation. So it's the microcosm of the macrocosm. Whenever we make something, it's our homage to creation, whether that's writing or art or food or a garden or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Women have an ability to live their life as though it were art.
Mm.
And we do that through learning to love ourselves, through helping other women learn to love themselves, through uplifting our sisters,
Mm-hmm.
as well as uplifting ourselves. It's beautiful
Yeah.
that we're writing that kind of book that requires that kind of digging,
Mm.
because that's where the authenticity and the truth comes from. You know, it's somebody that's
And I do think that's where all this Me Too and like let's get to the heart of things, and it's like we're done being fake. We're done with illusion. We're done with false power, um, flawed authority, right? And it's also an invitation for me to like, why does that trigger me? Well, what is my own relationship to false power? How am I a flawed authority, right? So for me, it's getting really deep into holding that I am, holding that peace or that being still and knowing, while all of this alchemy is happening within me of shadows wanting to be seen and ego states wanting to be addressed or fighting against me, right? So that's the war and peace for me right now is that process of writing and really digging in. Stephanie, tell us how we can find your book and where people can find you online.
You can find my book wherever you get your books.
And
So
it's just being released now. Like we're
yes,
cutting edge. Yeah.
yes, just being released now. So yes, you can get it on Amazon. I always like to give a shout out to bookshop.org and
Mm.
indiebound.org, because these are organizations that help to keep local bookstores alive.
Oh,
So, but you can get it anywhere. You can find me at byline-stephanie.com. That's my website. I have a place on there where you can contact me. I answer all my emails. That's where
great.
yeah.
Right. And we're going to be having some great discussions this whole week based around what we've talked about today online. So I
Great.
encourage people, I'll be tagging you and people can find like just this ongoing conversation about, for me, creation has been, I've gone around the block with this so many times of like things that I've manifested. And, I went through that season of just like the manifesting, right? And what's around that. And now I'm like, kind of like you, I just want to scale back and look at what I have created with the divine and honor and celebrate that. And I feel like if I stay in that energy of gratitude, more will be added to my creative process and I'll kind of know my next steps. Um, what do you see for yourself? Like what I know sometimes crystal balling it isn't always the healthiest thing, but at the same time, having a vision, can be really powerful. So, what is like this is a really loaded question, but what is the vision for your vision for what's going to be happening? Let's just say within the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years on
For
our
me
planet
personally or for the world?
from the perspective of what we've been talking about. And because you see yourself as a way shower, what are you what we are having a lot of women leaders rise up right now. This is the new power dynamic.
Yes.
This is happening. And I felt that when I started this podcast, is just giving women that. So what do you
Women
see?
bring,
Yeah,
well, women bring a different kind of power. I mean, from reading Elizabeth Lesser's book, where she distinguishes between male power is very warrior kind of oriented,
sure.
competitive. I'm going to kill it, kind of
Crush it. Yeah.
thing, crush it. Women bring another kind of power that can't help but inform and shape in the next decade. I think that girls now are being raised in a different way. They're not being isolated. Oh, you go over here. That's a boys' game. You can't play that. Girls are being told that they can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we've got this young generation right now in their 20s and 30s, which, there's a lot that an older woman like me could complain about, but I'm going to give you the positive aspect that this younger generation is so inclusive of each
Yes.
other, so beautifully inclusive. And there is a lesson for every single one of us in that. We are all in this together. And I think that they will help that generation will help heal up some of the divisiveness that we feel in our country and in our world right now. And I look forward to more women being in political office and leadership positions.
Yeah.
And I look forward to the way women lead and work. I think that I
Yes.
think Creatrix will continue to rise.
Yes. it's just very palpable. You can feel it. It's really exciting, and also lots of shadow work to be done. I see like this, I love women in power, like politics and whatever, but I also see this huge groundswell, this huge grassroots, like when enough women, let's just say mainstream, are in the field, when we hit critical mass for women recognizing this history, like things like Cassandra Speaks and the true history of patriarchy and how women have been complicit in their subordination for decades,
Yes.
centuries, millennia. When that realization and that awakening hits critical mass for men and women, but I would say especially for women, this is it. Like this brings in that golden era, that new earth. And I don't necessarily think all of the women will be in places of public visibility or writing a book, let's say, or doing a podcast or whatever, but they will be in their spheres of influence, respectively, rising up into that and leading the next, as you say, the next generations. It's like we will have a completely new everything. Systems will be different, everything. So I don't know how long it's going to take to hit critical mass, but I know the key players are now awakening to really push that forward, bring that out, if you will. So I just wanted to ask you, I have my own mystical like knowings around this. I've had my own visions around this. And it's just nice to align yourself with other women who are doing that. So thank you for, I can't believe you're 69. I'm like dying over that. But thank you for your work and for your time today so much. Is there anything that you would like to say in parting?
No, I've enjoyed the conversation. I mean, this is the kind of conversation, not only do I hunger for it, but I think all women hunger for this conversation,
Yeah.
to find a spirituality where the playing field is level, to find a place of balance in our own hearts, to work with what is and the potential of what can be.
Mm.
So I've loved our conversation, and thank you very,
Mm.
very much.
Thank you.